Hey guys, it's Dean. Welcome to the Better Man podcast. I have Thomas S. here today to talk about his health and wellness journey. Thomas is a relatively new member of Manful Yoga, but that's exactly why I wanted to have him on the podcast because you don't have to be doing this stuff for years and years to notice results. So, Thomas, thank you for being here.
Thank you very much for having me. Pretty
Yeah,
excited to be here.
me too. So let's start off with your oh shit moment. What was it that caused you to go looking for a solution like Manful Yoga or to start thinking about your health and wellness differently?
Yeah, I've had a couple, I guess, incidents, some more impactful than others, but I think the final straw for me was I had gotten on so many different medications that one
Mm,
morning I was looking at my hand full of medications and I thought, if I'm having to do this at 47, which I was at the time, what's it going to be like when I'm 67? Like I'll be having to take this handful of pills like 5 times a day. And I didn't want that. I didn't want to be that person. I
hmm
didn't want to be so reliant on drugs. And not that I'm have any issue with that. They're very helpful, but it's just there's ways to avoid that.
Yeah.
And that's when I started really getting serious about seeking out um, personal health and wellness initiatives.
Yeah. All right. So you were 47. How old are you now?
I turn 50 next summer, so I'm 49 right now.
Okay. Cool. So you're about a little over 2 years or between 2 to 3 years in your health and wellness journey. What was the first thing you did when you started that process?
Yeah, so even before that, I was diagnosed in 2020 as a type 2 diabetic. And so initially, I decided, okay, I'm going to start eating healthy, and I started walking a lot more. But that was the extent of the exercise I was doing. And walking's absolutely phenomenal for weight loss and regulating a lot of your systems as long as you are having a healthy diet.
Yeah. I'm
Um,
glad you
and
mentioned that because walking is like that's the number one workout in the world. Maybe
absolutely,
gardening. Gardening might be number one, but walking in is way up there.
yeah, and good for the mental health too. If you're like just taking the time to like be silent while you're
Yes.
walking and think about
Not
things
on one of these.
exactly, or
No, they're
listening to
fun.
heavy metal or anything like that, right?
Yeah.
Um,
I got those people in my neighborhood. They walk around like listening to heavy metal. I'm like, that doesn't seem fun, but they're into it.
I
So I
save
don't
the
know.
heavy metal for my workouts instead. So
Yes. Yes.
um, so yeah, so had and so that was January of 2020, and of course, within a few months, the world was shutting down.
hmm
And as tragic as the pandemic was for a lot of people and communities, I did use it to my advantage. Working from home to kind of focus a lot on the mental health and the physical health side of things. And for a couple years, things were going really well. My A1C went from over 9 to within 4 months it was down in the mid fives and kept it on average about 5.6 for a couple years. But then as time goes on, the world starts opening up again. You become social again, which
hmm
involves restaurants and eating and alcohol for social events and that type of thing.
hmm
And you know, you're back at work. The stress is there, and the pounds start packing on again, and the blood sugar starts going up. And even though I had avoided a lot of those medicines that I had referred to before, because of that, I ended up on those meds, quite a few.
mm
And so the first thing after that was looking around to see, what does someone my age do to get healthy again. And before finding Manflow Yoga. Even though I only started Manflow Yoga a few months ago, I had heard of it and done some of it in the past. And that's because the first thing I came to was Dr. Anthony Balduzzi's Fit Father project.
Hmm.
I know he's a friend of the Manflow
Yeah.
community as
Yeah.
well.
Great guy.
Yeah. So joined that near the end of 2022, but it is a lot of information, and I needed kind of time to process that. And I think part of my entitled mindset was, just being, and I see this with a lot of people who initially join, is that just being signed up and part of it, you hope by osmosis that things are just going to, the pounds are going to start falling off because
Yeah.
you paid some money to join a group kind of thing,
Right.
and that's not reality, right? So
Yeah.
um, so by May of that year, because I live in a northern climate, I'm in Ontario, Canada.
Okay.
Um, the days start to get longer, the snow goes away, and then it becomes um, more easy, more natural to kind of be out and about. So started following the Fit Father meal plan at first.
Hmm.
That the whole Fit Father plan focuses first on kind of like, why are you doing this? It doesn't just drive you right into exercise and working out and
Yeah.
stuff like that. First, you kind of settle on what your whys are and
Yeah.
what's
So
your
important.
motivation in getting you part of the community there.
What's
And
what was your why? What did you figure out?
so my initial why was that I just felt like I was on track to be dead in 20 years. And I thought I just had more to give to the world,
Mm.
whether that's like my wife and kids close by, or just community wise, or whoever in the future that I haven't even met yet that I can help, because I like to be a helper. I like to educate people who need help learning skills and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
so yeah, so
Another another
initially it was,
another quick follow-up question there.
yeah.
So, there's a lot of guys like you who really enjoy giving and being of service. Um, did you find it hard to prioritize self-care?
I did, like most men who are fathers. They you get into a career mindset, you get into a parenting mindset, you get into the, okay, I had my starter house, and then I'm on to my next bigger house and renovations because I want my family to be comfortable, and just all those things
Yeah.
that make you set your own personal health and wellness aside. Obviously, that's not the case for everybody, but I think culturally that's where men are in North America right now.
Mhm.
And but when I started, you know, um, trying to focus on myself, I think I was in a place where my kids were a bit older. Um, it was like, not, I wasn't in desperation mode, but it was like, for however long I push this off, that's taking time off the back end, for sure, undoubtedly, especially after being diagnosed with type 2. So it wasn't exceptionally hard um, to get into it at first. Now, I'm not, and we'll probably get into this more later, I'm not going to say that it wasn't a challenge to always stick to it. I've had some failures, I've had some setbacks, um, but being part of that Fit Father project community, and I can see the same thing in the Manflow yoga community, like there's no judgment and you're always welcome back. Like it doesn't matter if you've been gone for a year and things fell apart. Like you can come back and say, hey, this is where I've been for the last year, and like I need help to get back. And there's a community of people just like you, who without judgment are like, yeah, come on, let's go. What do you need? So So that's been very helpful. So it wasn't really a tough transition on the grand scale of things, but you are still changing your lifestyle, right? And I've tried in the past to do that and failed because it wasn't really a holistic approach, whether it's, the fad diets or whatever it might be, right? So, yeah.
Yeah. So as you're going through the first struggle that you had, or the first, big challenge for yourself was working with Fifth Project. You found your why. What were, so the first things that you were doing was it was it walking more? Was it dialing in your nutrition? What was it that you were working on initially?
Yeah, so after the why, Fit Father focuses on dialing in your nutrition. So I got that down and
Hmm.
started walking again, just to kind of
So
like.
can we talk about nutrition a little bit? So
Sure.
what were
Yeah.
some of the big changes that you made to nutrition?
Um, I think the biggest things were just honestly trying to cut out the garbage foods. And I'm talking like a lot of carb-based snacking. I'm not anti-carb in any way, but there's a lot of garbage carbs out there, um, sugary stuff. When we're filming this not long after Halloween, and when the kids would come home from getting all their Halloween stuff, there'd be a candy tax for dad at the door where a
Yeah.
certain kind of candy had to be
Yeah.
provided, and then instead of I'm part of my challenge, and I'm just finding out in the last couple of years is that I've been diagnosed with adult ADHD, and what comes with that is it's a bit of a, they also call it an executive dysfunction disorder, or you have trouble regulating dopamine. And so for me, binging was one of those sources of getting that dopamine hit, or other unhealthy behaviors, right? Because you're just always looking for that dopamine hit. So instead of like, oh, I got my candy tax and I'll spread it out over the next while, it would be destroyed before I went to bed that night, right? It just, and difficult stopping. So, I admit I'm like a recovering binge eater, to, from that extent. So like not, I wouldn't say like it's an anorexic type situation. I don't want to minimize people who have those kind of issues, but as far as kind of mindless, uncontrolled eating just to kind of stimulate yourself, stimming, whether it's a bag of chocolate almonds or a big bag of, popcorn that's got caramel and salt on it or whatever, just that activity, so easy for me mindlessly to destroy the whole thing. So those kind of behaviors is where I started to focus in more. And over the last couple of years, working with my doctors, understanding and crystallizing, like, oh, okay, this is an ADHD issue, inattentive ADHD. I wasn't, I grew up at a time, you probably did too, where someone who's ADHD was the hyperactive kid in class, and I was never hyperactive. And that's not really what ADHD is. It's more of an executive dysfunction, dopamine regulation type issue, and it manifests different with different people. So,
Hmm.
so that's so that area of nutrition focused on. I've always been good at having healthy meals, and my wife's a great cook, in that effect. It's the food eating in between, right? So like
Okay.
every night, demolishing either a bag of Doritos or a whole bunch of
Hmm.
ice cream, or
Yeah.
you know,
So
and
let's talk a little bit about that, because it sounds like you had, ADHD related, learning about that, recognizing that you binged as a result of that with the dopamine deficit. How did you what did you do when you felt those cravings as you're making this adjustment period, right? That's the hardest part, is when you're doing something new and making changes. So what did you do when you had those cravings and didn't satisfy them? Did you have a particular, process for for dealing with that?
I've tried a few processes. There's lots of tips and tricks. I even had a few, I'd say six Zoom calls um, with a psychologist specializing with binge eating. You know, they had a lot of great suggestions. Didn't necessarily work for me. I think what's helped is focusing on the source of it, and that's the dopamine, and trying to find other ways to generate that more healthily. And so, you know, when I'm trying something new, obviously the first 6 months it's new, so you're starting to get those hits. So, you know, by the time June of 2023 rolls around, I'm starting to actually execute these the Fit Father Project exercise strategies. You know, they go in phases, and so and you know, interacting with the community, and that's fulfilling it, right? And by November of 2023, I've gone from 217 down to 167. So a 50-pound loss,
Hey, great.
feeling really good. And then the classic 6 month timer for myself goes up, and it's like, I'm still doing the same thing. I'm not getting the dopamine from this anymore because it's not new anymore.
Oh,
Seasonal
okay.
depression starts to,
That's something that
uh,
I didn't realize that all. So do you feel like you have to keep changing things every 6 months? Like your body adapts to it and you got to keep changing it up every
Kinda,
six
yeah,
months?
like you were asking what kind of strategies do I use? Well, that's what I've been trying to do. So whether it's you know, going on a retreat or going down to Belize for a volunteer trip to help build a house,
Yeah.
or I switched it up last year and said, you know, I've never been a runner, never done cross country in my life. I'm going to run a relay race.
Yeah.
And so with a team, I signed up for Ragnar relay, the one in Minnesota that goes from St. Paul all the way up to Duluth, about 210 miles, with a team of 11 other people. And so then I'm like, at first I'm a bit in denial because seasonal depression had phased in December, January, February, and again
Hmm.
being a little unhealthy. But then, you know, I get training. I do my first 10K ever in June of this year,
Hmm.
and the furthest I had ever run before that, even when training, was about maybe 3 kilometers, because
Yeah.
I was doing interval training, and I thought,
Hmm.
well, this 10K will be a good it'll be a good you know, yardstick to understand how am I doing on my way to doing this Ragnar.
Yeah.
And I expected, well, maybe I can get to 5K and then walk, run the rest of it.
Hmm.
And to my surprise, I was able to run the whole thing. And
Wow.
sure, it was a bit of an old man jog, but there was no stopping, there was no walking. And it was one of the first times that I really felt kind of euphoric um, about the achievement.
Yeah.
It wasn't a runner's high because I was working the whole time to keep
Yeah.
going. But when I ended, it was just like, I don't allow myself to celebrate my successes very often, but it was,
You and every other man.
yeah, exactly. So it broke through this time. I couldn't stop it. I
That's
felt like it
amazing.
was a big deal. I was FaceTiming, you know, some friends in my family and stuff like that,
Yeah.
because I hadn't expected that I would have been able to do it, right? And you know, there's people who run a 10K every day, and that's great, but we all have our unique achievements.
Yeah.
That's kind of
So,
part of my strategy, trying to change it up.
so
And
can I
now,
I wanted to ask about that. So,
here,
um, have you been able to, was that the first time or I, so a lot of people aren't comfortable trying new things because they haven't had great experiences with being successful in this area in the past.
right,
Do you think that, did you have, was your experience with losing 50 pounds, was that for you? Was that, and I might be, you know, I do this all the time. I might be putting words in your mouth here, but do you think that there was a changing point where a certain experience or that certain achievement made you realize, oh, I can do new things. I am the type of person who can, try something new and be successful versus maybe in the past you didn't think of yourself as that type of person? Or do you want to talk to that at all?
Yeah, like one thing I've definitely learned from the community of men that I've been talking to is to give yourself grace, right? Because a lot of time we men especially, we take a lack of success or an achievement followed by failure as the end all. This doesn't work, don't go back there again. Too many bad feelings associated with it, just don't touch that third rail. And by learning to give yourself more grace, it's like, okay, I tried and failed, but I tried, right? And some parts of it worked. Maybe if I tweak some things and come back at it a different way, it might work again. So, like, even though I lost that 50 pounds, and then, I'm talking the next summer about doing all this running, in between when I was dealing with that seasonal depression, I gained back about 35 of those 50 pounds I lost, right? There was a lot of just unhealthy behaviors over that winter when it came to food intake that I was dealing with, right? And, I could have let that be the end all. I give up. I guess I'm just going to die early. But with the community of men who have kind of taught me to give yourself grace, come back anytime, these are just setbacks. I didn't hide from it. Like, I was able to admit it. Like, this didn't go right, but I learned a lot last time, and I'm going to implement it this time and you know, push myself even further, get further down the football field until finally I get that touchdown, right? So yeah, so that has
Yeah.
definitely helped have that mindset as far as being able to come back at something
Yeah.
and not have it be a be all end all if
Yeah.
it didn't go right the first time.
Yeah, and it's great that you had that community to help reinforce that and teach that. So that's one of the questions that I asked, and you answered it. So I'm glad you touched on how community has been helpful there. One thing that you were saying early on that I wrote down in my notes that I wanted to ask you, you said somebody my age, and so I wanted to ask about this
Mhm.
perception of where does your perception of or your ideas about fitness culture come from, and kind of why did that steer you toward, instead of looking at, I guess, mainstream fitness, you're like, okay, I need to look for something for a guy my age, or you know
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Like, I'm a kid of the 70s, 80s, 90s, pre-internet, and at that time, the what you saw either was young guys who were absolute, you know, lunkheads, and it was like, a lot of superficial presentation and not a lot of the backstory about how they got where they got, the hard work. It was more about, here's how I look, or it was like some kind of corny jazzercise or whatever, right? The first time I ever saw something that was a little closer to, what we have today is probably something like P90X. Remember when those videos came out and it was like, okay, this guy's kind of older, right?
yeah,
Probably even
yeah,
older than I was at the time.
yeah, I forgot
And
about that. I forgot that Tony Horton was Tony Horton, am I right? Tony Horton, right?
I think so. I can't remember
Yeah,
exactly, but
so he
yeah,
was probably in his early 50s, or definitely late 40s when he did that.
yeah. So that was the first time that I had seen something that was not specifically geared towards someone younger or someone who just wanted to do cardio type exercise that you might see on those TV exercise shows or whatever. So yeah. So then, obviously, as I'm getting older, pushing into the 21st century and ignoring my health, and then come out and I'm like in my 40s, and it's like, well, I can't work out the way a young person does. I had done some of that P90X stuff when I was in my early 30s or late 20s, early 30s, whenever that came out, and it was great, but it just not really what I was looking for at the time, because you are still very solo when you're doing it. There's no community. There isn't even any opportunity to make adjustments to it depending on your own personal situation. Maybe you have bad back, bad knees, bad shoulders. It's very it obviously at the time, like, it's burned onto a DVD, so it's not gonna change, right?
Yeah. So that wasn't what you were looking for. But what
No.
about so so would Fit Father Project, did that give you the workouts that you were looking for? Did that
Well,
provide
yeah,
the
like I think, like a lot of people, I Googled, fitness for guys in their 40s,
Mhm.
and that was one of the main hits that came up, and it just seemed very different because, like I said, it wasn't all promising. Oh, in 6 weeks we'll blast your abs and stuff like that. It was like,
Mm.
no, we're going to figure out, why you want to do this, and then we're going to lock down your nutrition, and then when you've got that going, we'll start getting on the fitness train, right?
Gotcha. So
And
it gave you a path and kind of a
yeah,
progression and
and
laying
it
it
gave
out for you.
me it gave me emails to contact coaches to say, like, I don't know if I can do this. Is there a modifier we can do? And they're responding within a couple days to help you adjust something, right?
Mm.
So yeah, and like I said, very very similar to the Manflow Yoga community, and your team, like Jesse and people like that, who are very responsive and very positive.
Yeah.
Sorry, so very positive and very responsive, and you know, just you can see that there's opportunity. It's not two dimensional. There's multiple dimensions to it, and so you will be able to find something there that works for you.
Yeah. So so Manful Yoga, was that that was like the next phase of, okay, I'm getting bored, I got to find something new, or how did Manful Yoga fit into this
Yeah,
whole
so I mean, I had heard you guys on each other's podcasts way back, maybe a year ago or year and a half ago. I can't remember the first time you guys did each other's podcasts, and you had provided a suite of yoga to the Fit Father project that a lot of people on there really really like. I had done some yoga last year in town at a yoga studio, run by a young man. Great and all that. The timing wasn't really awesome for my work hours, and just because I was in beginner yoga, and constantly there were new people joining, it got very repetitive very quickly because they were having to introduce kind of the same things over and over again. So when I decided I wanted to still do yoga to maintain my flexibility, because I have very stiff shoulders, very stiff hip flexors, I remembered, well, hey, Dean is a trusted part of this bigger family. I'm gonna go check that out, and signed up, and yeah, I've been working on getting more and more flexible through your programs,
Yeah.
and
So when did you and so you got started with that. How often were you doing the workouts?
I would say on average it was 4 times a week.
Okay.
Trying to
Did
do
you
them first thing in the morning, and I am not a morning person at all, so it was very um, very very strange at first, very tiring and taxing. So like every Wednesday I would kind of give myself a breather and let myself sleep in the extra hour before I went to work. But then came a day, it was very odd, where I opened my eyes and my first thought was, oh, I get to do yoga. right now. And then, I kind of, when the rest of my brain kind of caught up, it was like a bizarre moment because I have never been excited about anything in the morning. Even if I'm going on vacation, I wake up and say, oh my goodness, I got to deal with the airport. I got to do all this it doesn't matter how good the end might be. And this was just a natural thing, unconscious thing because it was the first thought. And I was like, wow, maybe there's something to this. And then over the next couple of days, did a little more self analysis and realized, I'm in a better mood at
Mm,
work after I do this. And,
yeah.
and at first I was just doing the intro yoga, the beginner's yoga, just to make sure I was getting technique down and all that. So it's not like I'm like pounding it out for an hour there to really, drive up a lot of neurochemicals or anything like that. It was like 15 minutes at first, but it was part of it was the work, and I think part of it was the fact that I call him Dean 2D, two-dimensional Dean on the screen there. He was with me the whole way, right? Unlike other traditional workout things, even with Fit Father, there's lots of videos and explainers, but ultimately it comes down to, okay, we've taught you, now go through these on your own. And with the yoga, you were there the whole time. It's like, okay, we're going to do this move and then we're going to do that move. And here's why we're doing this. And you should be feeling it here. And like,
Mhm.
oh, don't forget to keep, pulling your head up when you're breathing in, and
Right.
when you're breathing out, go a little bit more into the move. And I think just having that, superficial relationship in the morning with Dean 2D and
Deep
myself
2D.
getting this done was a big factor in it as well.
Yeah.
So
I think it's pretty cool that, I think it's a different kind of fitness high, right? It's like other workouts are going to be, not all workouts, but a lot of workouts are intensity focused, and you get through it and you're really sweating, you worked a lot, you've got this sense of accomplishment. Um, but yeah, when you get through a manful yoga workout, it's kind of like, yes, you have that feeling of accomplishment, but you also feel better physically right then and there. And there's also kind of this focus element. There's this calm, focused element that happens when you finish the workout that
yeah.
really does provide a noticeable improvement to the rest of your day. Do you think that other people notice that? Like, did your family or did your wife say like, "Hey, you're kind of in a better mood when you do yoga," or where else
Well,
did you notice that?
I noticed it at work because usually, my work got the benefit of my better mood because I'd be off,
Mhm.
off the work.
Yeah.
I think
And what do you do for a job?
so. I work for a nuclear power facility
Oh,
in
that's cool.
Ontario. It's one of the largest operating sites in the world, and I was certified for 12 years as a control room supervisor. Still act in that capacity, but not on shift. I've put a pause on my certification so I can focus on my team. We have a team of excellent people in operations who are helping do some multi-billion-dollar refurbishments on some of
Okay.
our reactors over like a 3-year period for each one.
Yeah.
So, a lot of accountability there, a lot of leadership aspects to it. So having that better mood, um, and I've been striving as a person in general to be more positive over this previous decade. I think before that there was some negativity there. There was a lot of sarcasm, although don't get me wrong, I do enjoy some sarcasm now and then. I think it's
Yes.
quite fun, but I think it manifested itself in ways that negatively impacted others. I wasn't a mean person, but it was just kind of unconscious, not building up people the way
Mm,
I could have, right? And now I've
got it.
been trying to focus on building up people, building up the team, keeping people positive, right? So I think this just leans into that and helps me, keep that sustainability
Yeah.
um, for
So
that.
so one other question I want to ask, and then I'll move into the rapid fire questions. What's the next big thing in your fitness? Do you have an idea of what the next thing you want to work on is, or a next goal?
Yeah. Strength is kind of my next thing. So Manflow Yoga has been excellent in helping me because while I was doing all that running, there wasn't a lot of working out. It was just too much for me on my body to
Yeah.
try and do workouts. So I wanted to get back into working out. I feel like okay, I've accomplished what I wanted to with running, and that's still part of the repertoire, which is great. But I wanted to focus on on strength again. But to just go right back into it after focusing on running wasn't a good idea. So yoga was helping me start that transition to get my body flexible and strong and resilient again. And what I started just on this past Monday was something called Project 45. So it's 45 days where we're focusing on, um, you know, workouts for strength and conditioning, minimum hydration, um, making sure that you're eating properly. In this case, we're using a primal diet as a focal point, and something that doesn't often happen with a lot of programs like this is mobility. So I thought this is perfect because now I get to wrap together my my Manflow yoga, which I'm really liking, and keep getting into other things plus getting back into workouts and conditioning and hits and kind of marry the two together and use them to benefit each other. Because often I think it's one or the other with a lot of people because it does take time, so it's
Yeah.
understandable.
I think
But
that's the hard part is finding finding the time availability. Like I think we'd all like to do more, but finding the right balance. And yeah, I hope that as you get into these things, these new things that you recognize that, okay, I don't have to keep doing as much of all these other things that I was doing before, but, continuing to rely on manful yoga for certain things or, definitely
mm,
using it as recovery workouts or even warm-ups. Like those are all things
yeah,
that can really help. And I don't think a lot of people realize that it can be a great warm up too.
yeah. Yesterday I used your old man testosterone builder yoga set as a
Hmm.
warm up for my hit yesterday because it was
Hmm.
just a 15-minute hit. So I kind of incorporated that 50 plus testosterone booster
Hmm.
exercise, which I hadn't done before, and so that was so that was good. You have one thing about your app and all your material. You have a lot of variety. You have a lot of content.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't see myself getting bored with it anytime
No,
soon.
no, it'll be hard to get bored with that. So,
Yeah,
um, so I have a few questions before I want to close out. So,
yeah.
what's one habit, belief, or mindset that has helped you the most with your overall health and wellness?
Um, leave your leave your ego out of it. You know,
Hmm.
kill your ego. You don't have to be the best anymore. You don't have to be the fastest. You don't have to be the biggest. You've made it this far. Get rid of your ego so that you can focus on the healthy aspects, so that you can give yourself that grace that I was talking about earlier. It's just a better place to be.
Yeah. All right. Second question. What is one thing that you do for your health that you think is often overlooked or undervalued by others?
Well, I would say investing in coaching.
Okay.
I think a lot of people that I've seen, they try and do the same thing that they've always done, throughout the years, and maybe it worked before, maybe it never worked, but they feel like this is all they know.
Hmm.
And coaching isn't cheap, but it's value added. It is a means to extend the quality of your life, right? To have
Yep.
longevity, and not just longevity, but quality and longevity by having good coaching, whether it's online or in person. And if the first coach doesn't work, because hey, not all of them are good, not all programs are good, that doesn't mean coaching's bad.
Mm,
Check out another one, and then check out another one.
right.
You know,
Yeah, there's a lot of coaches out there. Find one that you vibe with. I mean, I say the same thing about Manful Yoga. Like, if you don't like me, don't go find someone else too. Yeah, like find someone that you like. I'm glad you brought that up. So my next question: what's the most stressful part of your day to day life?
hmm, most stressful part of my day to day life. I guess the most stressful part of my day to day life is having to wear that mask all the time as someone who's ADHD, and maybe even a little bit, Asperger's adjacent sometimes. I really have to put on a mask, and have realized that I've been doing it almost all my life
Mm,
to fit into kind of a normal flow of society, right? I know my default programming is, especially looking back when I was a kid, is very insular, is not understanding of how and why people operate the way they do.
mm,
But I've never I've never allowed myself to succumb to that. Right? I want to be a successful person in life, and success comes in many forms. So I've been an observer of people all my life, and you know, create these little kind of subroutines of, okay, this is how a normal person operates under these conditions, and they become easier all the time. But it is always a mask of some kind, right?
yeah,
And
I'm thinking
and
of Dexter right now.
well, I hope yeah, not quite that bad,
Yeah,
but yeah, it takes energy. It takes
yeah,
energy. So you know, from a stress point of view, there's good stress and there's bad stress, and sometimes there's just energy consumption stress,
yeah.
and that's probably most of my stress is just the energy required to wear that mask.
Okay.
Yeah.
Last question: what's your best piece of advice for men who want to be healthier?
I've always had this adage that you only truly fail if you quit. So just don't quit on yourself. You can fail 20 times, try all different kinds of fad diets, exercises, all that stuff. And I can say that because I've been that person. And even though a lot of them in the end turned out to be, just useless or toxic or whatever it might be, I learned something from each of them. And those helped build stronger foundations for my long-term fitness,
Hmm.
on which I feel like I'm starting to get traction on building a healthy mindset, a healthy body, a healthy, spirit about things, and um, yeah, just don't quit on yourself. There's
Yeah,
there's 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 so many different avenues, so many different ways to live your best life,
yeah,
and you're worth it. You're worth it.
yeah. I appreciate that. All right. Well, Thomas, thanks so much for doing this interview. I really appreciate it. All the contributions you've made to the community. Again, I love that you're being active in our Facebook group. Whether you realize it or not, it's helpful, it's inspirational, and so I want to say thank you for being part of it and giving Manful Yoga a chance.
Yeah, thank you, Dean, for having me. It's been a great opportunity to chat.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Well, guys listening, hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you on the next episode. Hope this inspires you to be a better man.